Hey everyone, I'm Claire Liu and I'm the CEO of Know Your Team, and today is a super special day because on the Heartbeat we have the one and only Jason Fried, who is the co-founder and CEO of Basecamp, a project management tool that if you're not using, I don't really know what you're using. It's what we base our entire business off of. And for those of you who've been following Know Your Team, we were a spinoff company for Basecamp, or of Basecamp as well. But I wanted to actually ask Jason to come back on the show because Jason was the very first person I interviewed for the Heartbeat when I started this series 2.5 years ago. I went and looked back. Yeah. And today is a particularly special episode because it is the 50th episode that I've done of these. So interviewing all sorts of leaders that I've admired all over the world. And I thought Jason, for this particular one, I mean, you know, Jason and I talk regularly. He sits on our board at Know Your Team, that you would be possibly the best person to maybe flip the tables this time around and ask me the one question that I've been asking leaders over the past 2.5 years on this podcast. So I thought that's how we would kick things off, and then I have a bunch of questions for you because I just, there's so much to hear. But
Sure.
Should we start there?
Yeah, this is great. First of all, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be on the 50th episode and to be chosen to ask you this very special question, which is basically, as you start off all your interviews, you always ask, what's one thing you wished that you'd known earlier about being a leader? So yeah. Let's turn the tables and ask you the same question. What do you wish you knew? Let's call it 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've literally asked this question likely more than 50 times, and maybe in the best form, right? You try not to think of your own answer to the question that you ask. And I even knew that we were doing this episode, so I was like, it's funny. It's like I didn't really prepare for it.
Right.
So I think I'll just share the first thing that comes to mind, which is that I really wish I had learned to be more like myself earlier, which is probably some leadership poster cliche thing that's written everywhere, right? Be more like yourself or trust yourself. But I just have noticed that, when I was first starting out, and I mean, you've known me for a while before I was even running Know Your Team and getting started. And I think one of the hardest things when you're even just leading yourself, right? So before I even had a team is figuring out, well, like, what do I believe in? What do I care about? And how true do I actually even stay aligned to that? And I think the first instinct when you're trying to answer those questions, when you're starting out, is you pattern match. And you go, I'm really a big fan of, the stuff that Basecamp does. And so, I'll talk to Jason and David and hear about how they run their teams and how they, work with people. Or maybe, I'll talk to some professors, or I'll talk to other mentors or people who are older than me and wiser and, making lots of money. And this just seems like this would be the right path. And I would try those things. And, who's to say to what degree things worked or whatnot. But what I found when things would go either faster or smoother, or I would get really good feedback from the people I was working with, was when I wasn't looking at any other pattern for what I thought could be true. And so that's probably the biggest thing. I also think when I think about sort of even today, right? So it's like having tried to internalize that lesson, like even today, I'll even notice though myself being, well, am I doing this the right way? Like, am I having these conversations or making these decisions in quote unquote the right way? And then I'll go back and talk to people. And it's almost like a funny, weird habit to try to kick of, well, there's really no answer to figuring out how to do any of this well, whether you're running your company or managing your team, and how do you try to be more like yourself? So a continual lesson, maybe. I'm still trying to learn.
I think that's such a great point. And it's something that I think a lot of business leaders at all levels struggle with, which is, can they be themselves? Are they allowed to be themselves? There's a sense that leaders need to be this, these strong people who are always right and always pointing in the right direction. And we try to often emulate that, but then you're not being yourself. And you can't lead if you're not being yourself. People want to follow you. They don't want to follow the caricature of of a big, strong leader kind of thing. So I think that's really important. The other thing is that you're a small company. You have what, 3 people, 4 people now?
4 people. Yeah, we're 4 people total.
Right?
Yeah,
so,
we're tiny. Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes people, I think, who are new are looking out at, leaders who are running massive organizations and thinking that they need to model themselves after those people. But those people have a very different challenge than the challenge you have. You're going to be much closer to your team and much closer to your people. So it seems like it's a different style of leadership that I think you'll have to evolve into as the company grows as well. But I'm kind of curious. We've talked like 50 leaders at least, many more, but you've interviewed 50.
Yes.
What surprised you most about these people?
Everyone actually has a different answer to that question that I asked, or that you asked me rather. That's actually been the most surprising thing. Like I almost assumed when I started down this, this project of, I'm going to ask the same question. And I have a feeling I'm going to have to stop at some point because people are just going to start saying the same things. And what's so weird, Jason, is everybody says a different thing. Like literally. It's like they might fall under sort of broad scopes of like, empathy is important, right? Like that's like a theme that's come up, or communication's important, or, humility is important. Like there are themes, but everyone has a really sort of individual, like, not to be dramatic, but almost demon that they're personally struggling with and trying to sort of figure out and wrestle and nail down. And that, I didn't expect that. And
was there a particular interview, and I'm asking you to go back through the inventory in your mind, but was there a particular interview that surprised you in terms of like, I thought this person would have been X, but they turned out to be Y in a good way, of course. But was there any like lesson that was shared by somebody that you felt you were really legitimately like surprised by, and it caused you to reflect on your own leadership? I feel like you're learning, right? You're learning. Part of the interview process is getting to learn from other people. So I'm wondering if anything changed your mind, basically.
Changed my mind. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the most memorable interviews that I did was last year with Peldy, who's the CEO of Balsamic. And yes, phenomenal. Been a client of ours for a while, and it was immensely flattering. He was saying, "Oh, Claire, your writings like deeply influenced and changed the way that I've been running my teams." And it was so funny because then what he shared changed a bit of my mind. So the thing that he talked about was how he has this really interesting tendency to want to sort of save the day all the time. So people come to him with problems, and he's like, "Great, I fix them. Like I do, like I put my thinking cap on, I roll up my sleeves, and I go and I fix them for people, and it's great for a little while." And then he notices that over time, there's sort of, different bottlenecks start to happen where all of a sudden everyone is coming to him with these problems, and then realize that the things that he is actually good at, he needs to stop doing. And I'd always sort of known and read about, and there's so many studies, and you sort of look at all sorts of academic scholars who study leadership, and there are a lot of different frameworks for, yes, delegation's important, like the whole purpose of a team is to sort of to separate tasks, and so you're not the one doing them, and your role as a manager is to enable people, blah 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 blah. But the framing of it as like, look at the things you're good at and stop doing the things you're good at, I was like, interesting. Like it was a real like I think when I like leadership, like good leadership is almost always about internalizing positive behavior change. And I thought, like, what is more sort of powerful than telling yourself to look in the mirror for the things that you pride yourself in, and that you're like, I'm kind of really good at that, and like everybody comes to me for that, and being like, stop, right? Like I just thought that was so refreshing. Yeah.
Was he trying to essentially provide or create more responsibility for the rest of his team? Was it like, yeah, I know I can solve this problem, but it's not going to help people if I actually solve it, even though they're coming to me for help.
Right.
The real help is to say, actually figure it out yourself.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And for him, and this is what I really appreciated about what he shared as well, was it was about self-sustainability for the team. That if the team needs to be successful when he's on vacation, well, shit, he can't be the one then being sort of the, saving the day. What if he's out for a few weeks, on a very tactical level? And then, just thinking, okay, how do I, if I want this team to sort of really survive and thrive in the years to come without me, if I want Balsamic to in the long run be sort of outlast me, like how do I think about doing that? And I think that long-term view of leadership, and hey, you're a perfect person to talk about this, is, Basecamp, you're what, 20th year, is that right?
20 years this year. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a long time.
No,
some
but
grays in the beard, yeah.
It's I think that's no accident. You have to try pretty hard if you want to be around for 20 years, I think. You kind of have to really want to not die, right? And keep
right.
doing something.
Right.
So I appreciate that as well, because I think so much, it's kind of a byproduct of our culture that we just focus on, well, what's gonna help me in the next 6 months, or what's gonna help me in the next year. I guess to sort of, I've got so many questions for you, Jason. Like, literally,
sure.
I was excited about this. But one of the things I was curious about is, 20 years running Basecamp. I think I was listening to the Rework podcast the other day, and you said something really interesting where you said you're almost thinking about it though as the first of the next 20 years, right? In some ways.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just like, how do you? For people who haven't been running anything for 20 years like myself, how do you really ingrain that long-term view as a leader? Like, what's happening there to be remembering that?
Sure. Well, a lot of the decisions we make, we put them up against, like, will this help us last? So, for example, one of the reasons we work 40-hour weeks is because if you work 80-hour weeks, like, it's going to be hard to do that for a long time. Yeah. You might be able to do it in short spurts, but sure. We want to be in, the first thing is we have to establish that we want to be in business for a long time. Like, it's something that sounds kind of silly, but you actually have to say, like, we actually want to be around for a while. And
gotta want it first, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta want it first. So you gotta set that out and go, like, we want to be around for a while. Therefore, what are some sustainable practices we can follow? And work week, our cadence of our projects, the type of expectations we set for ourselves or don't set for ourselves, the fact that we don't set up unreasonable goals, or unattainable goals, or stretch it. We just we're very focused on the now, but also knowing that the now is hopefully going to continue for the next 20 years. But to your other thing about, so we turned 20, and I talked to the company. We had a meetup around this time when we turned 20, and about, so what about the next 20? So we did 20, what about the next 20? And it's easy. There's always momentum behind you. Like, you've been around for a while. So there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of decisions. There's a lot of confirmation bias. There's a lot of things that have happened to get you where you are. And it's easy to think that, now, like, the next 20, we should keep doing the same things because it worked over the last 20.
Right.
And maybe some of those things, like fundamental values and principles, I think are important. But when it comes to, like, tactics and strategy, I think we need to think about this as, like, let's think of the next 20 like we did the first year of our last 20, which was like, we're new and we can do new things. And so we're pushing ourselves. I'm trying to push us to do interesting things that we haven't tried before. So product launch in spring. We hired a head of marketing, which is something we've never had before. Yep. We're doing some things that we hadn't done before. And I think had we thought that this is year 21, we probably wouldn't have done those things, versus if we think it's year 1 of the next 20, then I think we kind of give ourselves permission to experiment some more. So I think it's important to do that and set the tone.
Absolutely. Do you think that reframing helps with feeling almost like letting go of that sense of we don't have anything to lose, right? Like, it's like, what's the, like, plaque that sort of builds up, right? Like the mental plaque or emotional plaque of, I've been doing this for a while and it's been working well, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that I find it liberating to just, like, say we're starting again, which of course we're not really. I mean, like, sure, we've got, tens of thousands of customers. We've got a long history. We've got brand equity out there. People know us. So we're not it's not fair for me to go. It's not like fair for me to compare starting new to someone who's really truly starting new. Like, truly starting new when no one knows you is quite a bit harder than where we're at. But there is this notion that as a company grows and as it's around longer and has more customers and there's higher expectations, there definitely is more to lose. And so you end up calcifying and you end up stiffening up because you're afraid. Right. And now you're just in like defense mode. Like, I just want to maintain and keep what we have instead of like figure out how to do new things. And so I think it takes a heavy hammer to break that coding, basically, and let us kind of loosen up again and say, let's try some new stuff. And like, who knows if it's going to work or not, but like, let's not be afraid of it, because it's so easy to be afraid when you have something.
Oh yeah.
So that's the thing. I feel like I have to constantly remind people that like, we're okay. That's great.
Yeah.
But we won't be okay if we just keep doing the same things we've always done, because that's what we've done. We need to do new things that make sense in context of who we are today, what the opportunities are, what excites us, that sort of stuff. So I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
I have a question though, actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go. You're like, I don't want to talk. Yeah, tell me.
No, I do. But something I've always wondered about is how do you find the people you interview? So you've interviewed 50. Like, what is it about?
I beg them, Jason. I beg them.
Sorry.
No. Okay, sorry. Keep going. Keep going. Yeah.
Who do you choose to beg and why? Like, what is it that you're looking for? I'm curious about that. Because look, there's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of leaders. So like, how'd you pick these 50?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's funny too, because it's cool. The podcast has been reaching more and more people. And so I get a lot of emails from, PR agencies and agents who are trying to suggest that their CEO or their client is the one that, that gets on the show. And I've actually said no to all of them, or I don't respond, which I don't know if that's necessarily the best strategy. But what I will say is I try to seek out people who I think will have something different to say and who aren't going to sit on talking points. And then that's like a really big thing. So I don't like to, for example, accept people on the show who have a thing going on right now. So
right.
A book to promote, or sometimes it overlaps actually, and like, I don't know, I think like the book's really good, and I'm like, I want to talk to this person. For example, we had Molly West Duffy, who did Emotions. It's a book on emotions, and the exact name that I'm forgetting, but excellent book, right? I was like, this is going to be great. And we're going to have Jerry Colonna, who wrote Reboot and is a fantastic executive coach. He's going to be on the show shortly too. So it's just, so there is exceptions in that sense, but I think the value of these conversations, or why I even wanted to do this podcast in particular, is I wanted to get away from the heavy-handed, cliched sort of personal brand of leadership. Like this idea that because it worked for me at GE or it works for me at BlackRock, that this is the way you do things, and it's 1, 2, 3, and these are like the catchy sayings that I have and mnemonic devices I have for you to implement these things in your team. And because I just don't think leadership works like that. It's like, it's proven, right? Like you look at any team in any organization, and it's just so freaking different. And so what I was more curious about are who are going to be the people who are actually going to be willing to open up about what's been different and particular about their slice. Because I think that's where the value is. It's not in any one person's particular sort of path or slice of what they've learned, but it's the accumulation of sort of seeing the whole bank of stories and then being like, oh, interesting. Like this part of what Jason is sharing is really interesting about, not being worried about so many things, but maybe that doesn't apply in all situations. And, this person, Des Trainer's really, viewpoint on this is really interesting. And Tim O'Reilly has this, right? And you just sort of assemble your own collage of what's making sense. Like, I think that's where the value is. And so finding people who are willing to get real about that and be honest about that, I think that's the way I've thought of it. And so usually that means I meet them in person, right? Like that's usually how it happens. Is I'll meet someone at a conference, or I'll watch them speak at an event, or someone will introduce me to someone, and I'll go, oh, like there's something just about the way they're thinking or what they're sharing with me that seems like they'd be willing to be honest.
Well, that's good. I think meeting someone first is kind of a good basic first bar, just so you can tell if they're kind of the real thing, perhaps. Yeah. Because I think you're right. A lot of leaders. I think the other thing that I've noticed about your interviews, for the most part, I don't know all the people, of course, but they're all like practicing leadership right now. Like they're running something. versus someone who used to run something and is now like writing a book about what it used to be like. So I think it's really good that they're all like practitioners and all, you know. The other thing that I think people get confused about when it comes to leadership is that leadership is not like, it's not it's not like you've arrived at it and you're good at it. Like most people, like you end up there and you don't know what you're doing. I mean, we're all figuring out as we go.
Yeah.
I actually feel like, I know, don't tell anybody, right? I feel like pretty much every company is actually held together with duct tape. Like everything's tenuous. People aren't really sure, and no one has the real answers. We're all trying to figure this out as we go. We have like strategies, and people have plans, and people want things to turn out a certain way, but leaders don't know either. And I think we're just someone trying to figure out our own job, like everyone else is trying to figure out their job. No one has all the answers. So I think it's refreshing when you hear people, and I've heard a number of people on your podcast talk about like, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure this stuff out too.
It's like that vein of uncertainty and the humility and self-awareness that people have to see that's like been the consistent thread, right? Through all of the interviews. Everyone is just sort of willing to admit like, well, I'm trying it out and it seems to be working, or this isn't working, or I learned this the hard way, but I'm not quite sure. I think, it's someone told me this. I forget who, but I really like this phrasing. I think, they talked about every company, it's a beautiful mess, right? So to your point of being held together by duct tape, but it's a beautiful mess. And like the beauty is in trying and putting in the effort to figure out what's working and what's not, but it's just a complete mess always. Like no one's, it's mess. Like that's also life, right? It's not this perfectly painted picture where everything's, aligned and connecting the dots. And so I think, I think that's also what makes practicing leadership so hard, because unlike other skills, for example, being an excellent violinist or guitar player or golfer or tennis, whatever the thing is, like, what excellence looks like. And there's a very, very clear path. Like there's a picture of success, and then it's like, then you do 1, 2, 3, 4 if you want to become that. It's like, oh, you practice this many hours a day, you go move to this place, you get this coach, then you go to Juilliard, then you get your, apprenticeship doing this, you do this for 3 years, and then it's like, and leadership, like, we don't even really know what excellence looks like, truly, because it's different depending on the team and what's going on. Right. And so it just makes even getting there harder. It's why, this is why I'm doing this and, running your team, and this is the work we're trying to figure out how to do, because it's completely unclear.
Yeah, what's neat about that is you think about like a great musician or a great athlete, they're probably going to be great in any venue. Like any venue they go to, they'll put on a great performance. But leaders are really dependent upon their teams. Yep. And so you think about like, could this person be pulled out of this situation and put into another situation and be good at what they do? Maybe not. Probably not, in fact. Mm-hmm. We as leaders are such a product of our own teams, and we rely on our teams to allow us to do what we do. That if we switch teams, we might be horrible. We might get canned. You could be totally fired. I'd probably be fired if I went to work somewhere else. Like you just don't, like, at some point, like, you're so attached to your team. Now, of course, there are principles around leadership that like you hope you could carry with you, but it has so much to do with the people around you and the situation, the timing, and all that stuff. That's what makes it interesting. Like you said, is that it's not like here's the marathon training regimen, and like by the time you're done with this, you'll be able to run a marathon, like guaranteed. Like it doesn't happen here.
It doesn't happen like that.
There's no way to say by the time you're done with this, you'll guarantee to be able to like run a team successfully. I don't know. know, and that's what's kind of fun about this.
It's fascinating. Like there's so many studies on this. Like there's everything from Gallup to the studies that we've run. Like so there's like major themes, but it's still like, well, like for example, like the three main skills that we found that all leaders, the best leaders tend to exhibit. It's trust, right? You have to build trust in your team. You have to communicate honestly, and then you have to create context. None of this is rocket science. The hard part is like, how do you build trust? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Like, how do you create context, especially when things are nuts and, the market's changing or you're running out of money? Like, how do you make sure everyone's in the loop, or when you're remote or hybrid? Like, it's the doing that's the hard part. It's less the, I know I should lead from the front. I know I should be honest with my team. It's like, you write about that all day. Doing it is a whole nother story.
And there are different phases of leadership because sometimes, like you might be struggling to pay the bills. That's like now you're in survival mode, which is like totally different, than like when you're comfy and cozy and things are going well for a while and you can take some more chances or whatever. So it does require you to sort of morph and shape shift a bit. So
exactly.
It's an interesting area of study because who knows? It's like always evolving.
Right. It's not quite science. It really isn't. Well, speaking of evolving, shaping, shifting. So last time we talked on this podcast, Jason, well, it's actually funny that very first interview we did, I think it was 10 minutes and we filmed it like in the Basecamp office. And I was like, hey, can you just do you want to just come in and like do this? Like, I'm trying this thing out. Like, I don't know if we'll do any more episodes. And here we are 2 years later, right?
Or were we sitting next to each other? Like
we were sitting next to each other. Exactly. Yeah. It was super hilarious. Like everyone watch back that first interview. Yeah. It's gotten, phenomenal feedback, but looking back, it's like you never really know what something's gonna turn into. But so since then, I mean, that's 2.5 years ago, and things have changed, right? The company's grown, different things have changed. What do you feel like you've learned in that time or changed your mind on, or just feel like, I've evolved. I've noticed myself evolving in different ways as a leader, trying different things out.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is I don't remember how many people we had back then, but we've probably added 10 people or something since. And that's actually, it turns out to be pretty significant at this point. We have 56 people. And it's a lot harder, I found, to communicate with 56 than, let's say, 46.
Really?
I just have found that, like, I think what it is that here's what I think it is like, maybe the way I communicate's the same, but there's more communication in general happening across the company because there's more people and there's more projects and people's time is more taken up by those things. And so when you want to communicate something, not everybody happens to run into it anymore, like perhaps they may have used to. And so you find yourself having to sort of explain yourself in different ways and maybe explain yourself twice or repeat yourself. And that's been a really interesting thing I've noticed is that I'll say something and then I'll think it was clear. Yeah. And then I'll find out that some people didn't think so and didn't know. And then like I'll have to say it again. And so like trying to tweak my communication style, I think is really important to provide. What I'm trying to do is provide more context around the decision, why I'm making decisions, not just the decisions.
Right.
I think in the past, when we were smaller, it was just easier to share the decision and move on. But now, with a lot of people in the company who are newer to the company, more than half of our company has been with us for more than 5 years, which is great. But that means that a little bit less than half, but still almost 25 people or so have been with us for just a few years, and they don't have any of the context around like how we ship products, how we launch products, why we do what we do. So I'm finding myself in a good way having to provide more justification for the decisions we make. And that's been something that's new for me. So learning that.
I'm surprised at the inflection point, by the way, being like 45 to 50 or to 46 to 56. You know what I mean? Like that's
more than 50. It's probably
right.
Like that
Isn't
was
that?
Really
I think that's interesting. Yeah, I think it's a similar experience based on other CEOs and executives I've talked to. So, anywho, but the second thing you were saying,
So there's that. The other thing I've had to come to terms with, is I've gotten worse at some things that I used to love to do. So I used to love to do more of the like hands-on design work, and this is kind of probably what Peldy was talking about in a way. I used to do, a lot of hands-on design work, HTML, CSS. I just found myself having less time to do that, and therefore, like, my skills have atrophied. And so, at some point, you have to realize you can't. I mean, you can maybe, but like, it's probably not a good thing that. It probably is a good thing that certain things you used to be good at, you're not good at anymore, because that means you have to get better at other things. And I've realized that like strategic thinking, big picture thinking, having time to think, that's where my time is better placed than me digging into the code and messing around. Although I have always loved to do that. I've stayed out of it long enough now that I feel like I'm a little bit nervous about getting back into it. Like I feel like I'm not as good as I used to be, and then things have changed there. And I think that's something that I've heard from a number of leaders, which is like, look, your job changes. Like you probably used to be an individual contributor. And now you're a leader or a manager or an owner or whatever you are. And for a while, you can hang on to those old skills because they take a while to fade. But at some point, they do fade, and then you need to pick up new things. And just kind of coming to terms with that has been a challenge. It's something I'm still struggling with. Is like, I'm not as good at those things as I used to be. And I can't just jump in like I used to. I have to maybe ask some people to do some things for me now, which I used to be able to do myself. And that's been hard, actually. And it's been more noticeable over the last couple of years as like web technology has changed in a way where I'm not as up to speed as I used to be. So that's something that's changed. I think it's been interesting. And then the last thing is again, getting back to this whole like 21 or year one of the next 20 thing, just kind of recognizing that like maybe the things that we've done and maybe the leadership skills that I've had, like they still work, but maybe they're not going to work as well. And I shouldn't expect that they will automatically work over the next, or even over the next 5. So the notion that what has worked may not always work is, I think, an important thing to come to. And it took me a while, I think, probably to get to that, where I in the past, I might fall back on habits. Yeah. Like, this is just how we do things. So, like, we're going to do it again because it worked before. But, like, I don't know. So, for example, like, saying, like, 5 years ago, we said we weren't going to build any new products anymore, which is one of the reasons we spun out Know Your Company and now Know Your Team.
Exactly.
And we've just decided that we want to build something new. And if I would have said, like, we said we weren't, so we won't, but why that's just something we made up. Like, that's our own rule. We can change that rule too. I think is a really valuable thing to do from time to time. So we're doing that with this new thing. We've got a couple other things planned next year that we're going to do that we said we probably wouldn't do before. And I like this idea of things we said we wouldn't do. Those are the things we're going to start doing and see what happens.
I love it. I mean, you've always been refreshingly just such an advocate of, being able to change your mind. It's okay to change your mind, and it's okay to change in general, and that the change is important. So I love that.
Totally. Yeah, and tied to that, I feel like I probably disagree with myself a dozen times a day, right?
Just that's a lot of times, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Maybe, no. I think it's probably accurate, though. Like, things I'm thinking about, I'm like, you got to see it from all these different perspectives, and you have to see it from different sides, and you have to play the other angles, and I think I've gotten better and better at that as well. When before I might have been a little bit more of an absolutist on certain things, because I'm so confident that this is the right way. And now, like, I'm more willing to go, I actually don't think this other way is the right way, but I'm going to try that to find out. Right. Because if I don't try it, like, I'm not going to know. So I think that's a valuable thing to kind of throw yourself into situations like that where your instinct would say this is wrong, and your instinct has served you well in the past, but these things should evolve too. Your instinct should evolve in a way as well. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
What in these next 20 years, Jason, do you want to improve the most as a leader? Casual big question there.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. Sometimes I have a hard time, if I really believe something and it's shown not to be true, sometimes, or like maybe the data shows otherwise, or sometimes I just have a hard time admitting that. And I'll look for justifications to say, well, not yet, or maybe maybe we're looking at the data the wrong way. Like, I sometimes I hold on to things a little bit too tightly, or hold on to convictions, or hold on to guesses or bets or whatever a little bit too tightly. And I think sometimes you need to do that, because sometimes it does take a while for something to play itself out, and sometimes it takes 6 or 7 attempts at it to make it work. But there are definitely times I know where I'm like, I should actually come to terms with the fact that this wasn't working, or this didn't work. So I'd like to get better at that. That's a hard thing for me. I think I've gotten better at it, but I still recognize myself kind of clinging to an idea that I had because, like, well, I still think it's a good idea, but, like, hey, it just didn't work. Like, sometimes it just doesn't work. You got to move on. So I'm working on that. I think that's something I'd like to get better at. And that's a leadership thing, because I don't want to continue to ask people to go in a direction in a given project or situation or whatever it might be that just isn't panning out. But, like, I feel like it must pan out. It's the wrong way to think. So
it's funny. I feel very similarly in the sense that I can get very attached to, like, a vision or a point of view. And I find that it always ends up leading me in the wrong place, right? It's like, oh, well, that eventually didn't work out, or oh, we just spent all this energy, trying to make it work and it didn't work. And then I think the other thing for me that I've thought a lot about and, working on this myself is like, is that behavior that I want our team to learn, right? Like, do I want everyone to be that attached to their ideas? No, it's like my expectation actually, like the expectation that, I have of my team is like, no, we go into each, we talk about things as objectively as possible, and it's all in service of this bigger thing we're trying to build. And we can't be attached to the code that we're, putting together or design. We have to be able to throw stuff away. We have to view everything as an experiment. It's like, I say that. And it's always interesting to hold up that mirror and be like, okay, well, for the ideas that I like,
right?
How closely am I being, am I tying myself to that and holding myself accountable to that? And that self-check is always hard. So thank you for sharing.
It's really
that.
hard.
Yeah,
it's really hard to do. And all we can hope is we get slightly better at it. I mean, like there's no way to perfect this probably. But hopefully every year, every month, every quarter, whatever, we can get a little bit better about it and let one idea go that you just, even though you're clinging to it, some things just need to resolve and go away. Like, didn't work, or not the right idea, or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
So the challenge, of course, is figuring out, like, it's hard because it's like, when do you pick that moment to say, like, I'm going to throw in the towel on this one? Because sometimes things do take a while. So that's the challenge, and you got to kind of figure out how to thread the needle. But it's something I think that it's like will take forever practice to get better at.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have so many questions, Jason, but I'll end on
part 3 another time.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I guess the last question that exactly. We'll just have to wait 50 more episodes here. But the one question that I at least have on my end that I do want to ask is, especially just given this really interesting point in Basecamp's history where, it's the biggest you've ever been. I believe, for the past few years, you've had sort of managers in the company for the first time, like other than really you and David. And I'm so curious, through that transition, and this is not, just unique to Basecamp for any company that goes through that natural growth, but how have you thought about how you grow or influence? I don't even know if influence is the right word, but even set a good example for the managers that you're working with, right? Like, how do you think about coaching them? Like, I'm just even curious of the way you think about it. Is it, oh no, Claire, I kind of just like try to be the best CEO and do the things that I'm doing and just hoping that by example people pick it up? Are you like really deliberate on that coaching aspect? Like, how do you think about that relationship between you and now these managers that you've got?
Yeah, I've always thought about it. I tend not to coach that much once someone's become a manager, but ahead of time, like I have a sense. Like, for example, Jonas, Jonas. Jonas is now leads the design team, so he's like been promoted to lead the design team at Basecamp. For the past year or two, Jonas and I had been working very closely together on product development, and in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, Jonas could be a great manager. Yeah. And so I've been kind of over the past, couple of years, like helping him or involving him in more conversations, involving him in more debates with David and I. Like David and I might be going at it on something, and like I pull him in so Jonas can see how we think about things. Yep. Trying to get him really involved in these things before it's time to actually say, like, I think it's time that you've earned this chance or whatever it might be. Yeah. Then after that, I feel like I'm much more light-handed on the like coaching after the fact. So I try to like bring people along and help them get better, and then like sort of set them free, and then be like someone who checks in from time to time versus being really heavy-handed with the coaching. Yes. I feel like it's all ahead of the moment, not after the moment. That's kind of how I've always done it. I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's how I've always done it. And I haven't had a lot of experience because there's only been a few people in the company that we've kind of put in that position. But I feel like it's a really good, like versus like taking someone who is an individual contributor, like elevating them to manager because we need one today, and then like spending the next 2 years trying to make them better at their job. I like to make people better at their job before they get into that particular position. And then let them free and let them sail. So that's kind of how I've always done.
I think preparing and training before the moment is, that's how you get someone hopefully sort of optimally ready. It seems to make sense in that situation. Thank you so
Sure.
much for everything you shared. This has been a blast.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me on. It was great.
Yeah, you bet. Well, everyone, I'm sure if you're, if you're listening, tuning in, so much to learn from Jason as always. And look forward to having you tune in on future episodes of The Heartbeat. So thanks again, Jason.
Thanks, Claire. See ya.
Yep. See ya.